Judging from my first impressions, IL2 Korea was worth the wait. And I've been waiting for a long time, even before it was announced. Because for once it's a setting nobody has squeezed to death. We've had Stalingrad, Normandy, the Channel, the Pacific over and over, but the early jet age, almost nobody touches it. It's such an interesting moment though. These first jets were basically rocket cylinders with a cockpit and a set of guns bolted to the nose. The analog Wild West of jet propulsion. Nobody fully knew what these things would do at the edge yet. That's the era this game drops you into. So when I got access to the press build, the MiG-15 was the first thing I jumped into. I'm genuinely crappy at flying jets, so you're going to watch me discover this thing more or less live. We're flying Black Thursday here. That was a real incident during the Korean War, where a large formation of B-29 bombers got jumped by a swarm of MiGs. 3 bombers went down, plenty more got chewed up, and it forced the US Air Force to rethink their whole bombing strategy. Which makes it a perfect scenario to stress this new engine. We've been promised a lot less load on the CPU, which should mean bigger formations and far more aircraft in one fight than anything Great Battles could manage. So let's send it and see if that holds up. Brakes on, full throttle, release, and we're on our way. This, by the way, is the high graphics preset in 4K with DLAA as an anti-aliasing method. I'm running a 9800X3D with 64 gigs of RAM and a 5080. We get 75 FPS on the ground, CPU at 15 to 17% and around 90 FPS in the air. CPU then sits at 13 to 15%. GPU always is at 99. The game has a nice feature where you can skip the long flight to the target area, but of course you can opt to fly there manually for like an hour or so. We won't do that. So here we are, right above the bomber formation, and the game looks gorgeous. While I think the terrain still could need some work, the plane models, clouds and contrails already look fantastic. Let's fly right into the formation and see if we can take down some bombers. Charlie 8 is the victim we've picked. Let's sweep the whole plane with our guns. Nice one. 2 engines on fire and the B-29 is going down. We're not so lucky with the next one. We only get little time on target and the 30mm is hard to hit. Also, I'm not used to the MiG-15 and my aim drifts up. The fact I forgot to retract my flaps might contribute a bit, and now they are jammed. So let's use this as a reason to reset the mission and switch to the Ultra preset with DLSS balanced. On the ground we get 110 to 130 FPS. The CPU sits at 17 to 21%. GPU is around 90%. The moment I'm in the air, frames build to 141 FPS, which is the limit I set for my monitor. CPU then sits at 15 to 17%, GPU at 99%. This time we'll not forget to retract our flaps, because I don't even deploy them for takeoff. Genius, isn't it? The game looks gorgeous with these settings, especially the atmospheric effects like the sun shining through the clouds, but not insanely different from high. I'd say with a decent mid-range system you're not going to have a problem running IL2 Korea, especially since this is only early access and there still is going to be a lot of optimization going on during further development. What I'm using here for head tracking, by the way, is the Tobii Eye Tracker. It works out of the box as well as Track IR. Within the bomber formation, while the fight goes on at Ultra DLSS balanced, the GPU sits at 55 to 65%, CPU mostly around 26 to 30. FPS fluctuate between 85 and 97. This all gives hope for proper VR performance, which I have not tested yet, but I'll get to it on the weekend. This time we're not only chasing bombers, we're going to try to take down one of the shooting stars that are flying escort. I'm nearly blacking out as I try to pull in behind Yellow 2. He manages to get away, but Red 4 doesn't see me coming. We're sneaking up on him and into firing position, only to shoot horribly and miss by a mile. But the second salvo hits the fuel tank and down he goes. Green 4 gets a bunch of hits in the engine and later in the wings, but manages to dive away. I'm then too greedy to stay on his tail and black out like an idiot. I manage to catch up again, only to miss the easiest shot of my life again. Time to call it a day and go home. In another sortie, I got pulled down to the deck and greedily overpulled and lost control. The tree models look quite good, I think. Check that out. If you hit your objective or fly off far enough from the battle, you can opt to return home, and that's what we do here. We're popping up 20 kilometers in front of the airstrip. While we land, let's draw a quick summary. So, what's the verdict after a few flights? Honestly, it's a lot of fun. Let me start with the flight model, but with a big caveat. So far, it feels good to me. The plane behaves just the way someone who only read the spec sheet and knows nothing else about the real MiG-15 would expect it to. It shakes near critical AOA, stalls are more or less predictable so far, the engine feels punchier than I'd expect from such an early jet, and it's nimble but still carries some weight. But here's the thing, I'm not going to tell you the flight model is good, and I'm not going to tell you it's bad, because I'm not qualified to, and neither is anyone else who's only had this for a few days. The people who can actually judge a flight model, the hardcore study sim crowd, needs weeks in the aircraft to say anything real about energy retention, stall behavior, compressibility, transonic handling, the stuff that actually defines how a plane flies. And the MiG-15 is exactly the wrong jet to rush, because it's interesting precisely for its transonic quirks and that notorious instability at high speeds. A real verdict means deliberately flying it to the edge of the envelope. Nobody serious has published that yet for good reason. So, I leave the flight model to the real pilots and the people who know the MiGs and Sabres far better than I ever will. For now, all I say is this: nothing about it felt wrong. What I can tell you is the rest. Performance is good, and you saw the numbers, head tracking works, and the UI is a real step up. There was even a preset ready for my VKB MCG Ultimate, though not for the stacks. And regarding the key binding menu, small spoiler for next week, I think it's the best one I've ever seen in a sim. You can even tell it to ignore devices, so the gamepad you plug in occasionally isn't interfering with your flight controls. And there's a dedicated gamepad mode. I'll go deep on VR performance, key binding, and all the other stuff in the full overview coming next week. Until then, you might want to check out my HOTAS overview here to hunt for new gear. I mean, there always is a reason to pile up some more, right? Or at least make plans to. Thanks for stopping by, fly safe, and see you there in a second.